Hey there, Bible buddies. I've got another Bible review for you today. And this one's another beautiful example of a mid-century Collins Bible. The specific edition is a King James Version produced in 1949, and this is a New Brevier text edition. Now, recently we've looked at some New Brevier reference editions, so I figured we'd give this one a look. The primary difference between the two obviously being the fact that the one had the center column references, and this one's just going to be a text edition of the Bible. So if you weren't looking for the references or you just wanted like a nice simple reader, this would be your way to go. So let's get started on the cover. You can see this very beautiful grain here on this cover. And it is marked as a genuine leather, but it does have this very nice pebbling. It is very tactile and a very soft leather at that. It's very excellent condition for its age. We do have Holy Bible, kind of deeply stamped, and it is very offset. I mean, like incredibly offset on the cover there. I'm really not sure why they did that. That was just kind of the standard for Collins back then. To me, it's kind of endearing. They don't always have to be like, front and center. This is just kind of kitschy to me. It's kind of unique. I don't know. There are also two kind of perimeter lines here. There's one on the very edge and then one a little kind of inward towards the book block. On the spine, that line continues. And then we have Holy Bible illustrated and then Collins all the way down at the bottom. And there are 5 spine hubs here. They're kind of pressed in and they're ever so slightly burnished, but they're definitely pressed in. They're not raised. You can see there, they kind of divot in a little bit. Now on the back, the perimeter lines continue, and then we have that amazing grain continued. That's really a nice leather. And I'm not sure, if this is a simulated leather or something like that, because again, it's just stamped genuine leather. But it's a wonderful grain. Very nice grain. Very well preserved. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features. You can see the head and tail bands there are white, and there's a little rinky-dink ribbon there. We'll take a closer look in a second. And you can see that wonderful luster of that, what I assume to be is a actual gold gilt. Because it is very shiny, it's very well preserved. Looks beautiful, love it. On the bottom there you can see the other tailband, or the tailband there in white. And then again we have one of these rinky-dink kind of, woven nylon ribbons here that were, I don't know, of this age, of this era. And they are just terrible. They're so easy to break. They constantly get tangled and frayed, and they're just a mess. I really dislike these ribbons, but I guess for whatever reason they decided to use these back in the day. So we're seeing it rear its ugly head again, and this won't be the last time we see them. So just a heads up. Let's go ahead and get it opened up. And we'll see the construction here. It's a edge-lined construction because this piece does come up here onto the text block. Now, I'm assuming that this is some sort of synthetic material. It almost feels like a polyurethane or something like that. It does not feel like a paper. On this side, we just have a matte finish black paper. And I'll show you the corner work so you guys can take a look at it. Not that it's anything to write home about, but it is fairly clean and well done. And then we'll take a look at the bottom here. It is stamped with genuine leather. Now, Collins, in Bibles of this era, they tended to kind of bounce around where they stamp this. Sometimes it's back here, sometimes it's here, sometimes this, kind of in the same spot on the front cover. This is always appreciated just because it makes it so clear and easy to identify what the sort of leather is. So, let's go ahead and get into the text. We have kind of a very thick sheet here. And we have our presentation page. And interesting, there was a little bit of transfer here of the print. I'm not sure why, but it exists. So after the presentation page, there's just this page with the illustration on it. Now this paper is one that we've seen before. It's kind of like a wax coated paper. I don't know how to explain it. It's thick, like the presentation page, but it's got like a very kind of dense waxy kind of feel to it. I would imagine this is like the equivalent of a coated paper from back in the day. Nowadays, coated paper is much different. It doesn't feel anything like this, but, I guess this is how they did it back in the day, how they coated it. I wonder if it's actually, coated with like a layer of wax or something, but I'll show you this illustration. Now, there are illustrations throughout. I'll stop and show you some of those. And the way they did it is kind of unique, but we'll take a look at that in a bit. And you have the title page there. And at the bottom, you can see that it is marked New Brevier 8VO text. Now, this size looks a little bit smaller to me than an 8VO. Which would be an octavo. So I'm wondering if they're referencing kind of the size of the text. Like this text would be the size of the text that would be used in an 8VO edition, but it's kind of, sized down a little bit to fit. Now we have on the back side the license for the print, along with all the printing information. I love how Collins does this. It makes it so obvious as to what they did and when it was produced and all the layout and all the features and all that. It was printed in Great Britain. And you have the epistle dedicatory. And you have your table of contents. And you have your table of signs used in this book. And then you have the first book of Moses called Genesis. go ahead and flip a little bit so we can get a better feel for it. There is some overcast stitching. Oh, and this is a beautiful example of it. You can see this, I'm hoping, on the camera very nicely. But there's that secondary line there of overcast stitching. And again, this stitching helps adhere the first signature to the book block, as well as usually the last signature if it's present in the back, to the kind of the construction. It just kind of helps everything adhere together, because usually what happens, and I think it's funny enough because I think that it still happened in this edition, even though it has overcast stitching, what normally happens is you can see kind of like what this is doing, where the first signature kind of pulls away from the text block there. So in this instance, it has overcast stitching, but it really didn't help. It just kind of moved the section that pulls away from the rest of the book block a little further down, if you know what I mean. You know, instead of it separating at page 16, it separates at page 32. So, you know, I wish that it was a little more effective. Maybe it was just the way they were doing it back then, but I know sometimes nowadays they still do that, and sometimes, you know, manufacturers just kind of leave it off, but I'm not sure if there's any benefit to it because obviously it's still kind of separating here. Here's one of those illustrations in the text, and we'll take a look. Now, in this instance, it is color on both sides, but we'll see as we get into it that they kind of flip-flop. Like sometimes it's color, sometimes it's black and white, and I'm not sure why they would have chosen to do that, but that's just the case. So these two here are in color, but again, later on they'll be in black and white. Let's go to a little kind of further section here. Here we go. Yep, so here you can see an example of the black and white image, and then, yeah, it's black and white on the other side. So again, I'm not really too sure why they would have chosen one versus the other, or not, you know, just ran it, you know, all color, all black and white. So I don't know. I wish I did know, and then I'd be a little bit more familiar with the construction of it, maybe, or the, you know, the production of it. But let's go ahead and take a look at the text. We flipped enough. So this text is pretty standard. You know, again, it's a text edition, so there's no footnotes, there's no translator notes, there's no references, there's no sort of call-outs, there's nothing. It's just a plain text edition of the Bible. Now, you'll see that if whenever a Bible is labeled as like text, that typically means it's like this, whereas, you know, if it had references, it would be labeled as references. So if you can't see the inside of the Bible, you know, at least try and get a picture, or have the you know, the seller, if you're purchasing it online, you know, kind of read you what the little, maybe the label is, unless I can take a picture for you, that's even better. But, you know, there's other ways to kind of figure out what's inside the Bible. And it is kind of interesting to note that there are like new Brevier text and new Brevier references, and they tended to do that with all of the models, because say like Pica is like a very large print Bible, and they have Pica reference and they have Pica text. Or you take like Ruby, which is a much smaller edition, and they have Ruby text and Ruby reference. So, you know, I guess it just depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for a reader, or if you're looking for something with some additional material there. But it is a double column, verse by verse, obviously, like all King James Bibles, or most King James Bibles, I should say. They are using Pilcrow markers there to indicate the starting of a new paragraph. And we do have the book name and the chapter numbers up at the top of the page. And we have some like little running headers just at the top of the page. There are none in the kind of at the beginning of the chapters or the beginning of the books or anything like that, just at the top of the page for the running headers. We also have the kind of cumulative chapter numbers there. You can see 186. So even though this is Deuteronomy chapter 33, this is the 186th chapter in the Bible. So that's just kind of a neat little thing they do sometimes. I kind of like it. I think it's neat. Kind of a neat thing to do. There are double line drop caps at the beginning of each chapter. And that seems to be about it. Yeah, not too much. It's just a plain text Bible. You know, oh, and the page numbers at the bottom center, I guess would be the last thing to call out. And they are economizing here on the page. You can see that the new book starts here at the end of the previous book, so they're not starting the books off on their own new pages here. Let's take a look at this print. Yeah, so there's another black and white print. Kind of hard to even tell what it even is. You know, they're kind of aged poorly. Now, this paper, you can tell, is very heavily oxidized. I mean, I'm assuming you can tell on camera. So I'm not sure if it's Oxford India paper. It's not labeled as such, so I would imagine not, which would explain why it's so heavily oxidized. You can also see here, this is a great example of this text that just, I mean, this text, you know, this text took time off from work. It packed its bags, it loaded up the car, and it drove to Gutterville. I mean, it is like all the way in there. And it also rented a hotel in downtown Guttersville. It's like all the way in there. Now, I'm not sure if this is unique just to my Bible that I have, or if this is kind of the standard and what's to be expected for any time you would, you know, pick up a new Brevier text edition. You know, it's way deep down in there. So that's how it was back in the day. I guess that was maybe a secondary thought of theirs. So let's try and look at the poetic section. Not that there's going to be anything we can see here, in Psalms that there's no, there's no kind of indication here as far as like a poetic setting or anything like that. One interesting to note is the fact that, the way that the up here in the corner, the chapter numbers are listed. It appears that, this is all chapter 78. So it's labeled as such. And then even though chapter 78 continues here, it's not labeled up here as 78, but only the 2 starting chapters are listed. So 79 and 80. Interesting how they did that. Let's go over to the New Testament title page. There we have the end of Malachi. And your New Testament title page. And then you have the Gospel according to Matthew. And as you could already tell, it's a black letter text. There's no red letter here. We'll take a closer look at the paper, though. So you guys can see the show through, which is absolutely nil, nothing, nada. I mean, maybe like a very little bit. You might be able to see like right in there, kind of. But it's very light, the show through, very light. So, what's interesting to me is that like, India paper is kind of touted as like the best paper ever produced. And it certainly was, I'll say that. But other papers, other papers that were used, even if they weren't India paper, the show through was very minimal on them as well. India paper's knack was the fact that it was, I'm assuming it was probably like an acid neutral paper, because they always tend to be still kind of like on the whiter side, so they don't oxidize very readily, which is a plus. And then Oxford India paper also tends to be very thin, just because they had the ability to do so and still get away with, very minimal ghosting and show through. But, I don't always prefer that. Sometimes, for me, it's easier to have like a slightly thicker paper and a slightly coarser paper, something with a little bit of texture to it, because it just makes it easier to turn the page. Sometimes with these Oxford India papers that I have some editions that like the paper is so thin, it's got to be like an 18 GSM or maybe 20 GSM, and it's almost impossible to turn the page because they're just so thin. You feel like if you turn one and you get like 15 pages all at once. So it just ends up being kind of cumbersome. But let's go ahead and get to the end. The New Testament. Oh, and you can also see the beautiful red under gold art gilt. It is very well done, very well applied. I'll show it to you guys there. Nice and even, nice and dark. I love that when they do a nice dark application of it. But it looks very good, especially against that beautiful bright gold. So let's go ahead and get to the end. There's the end of the New Testament. We have a blank sheet, and then we have selected helps of the study of the Bible. There you are. Here's your table of contents. And I'll show you this, and then we'll just kind of flip through them. I would imagine a lot of this is going to be kind of repetition. So here's summaries of the books of the Bible. Oh, that went quick. Usually the summaries stretch on for quite a while. Yeah, so here are the summaries. And then we have the languages of the Bible, the English versions of the Bible, a handy table of parables and miracles of the Bible, and then the New Testament. Weights and measures. 10 Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, Beatitudes, the 23rd Psalm, Paul's missionary journeys, "1,000 questions and answers." I love this. I'm going to show you some examples here. All right, so I'll let you guys read it for yourselves if you want to pause. But this is a very unique idea, and it's kind of like, it's just little questions and answers. And it's neat if you want to, kind of quiz your kids or quiz yourself on it. Just for some biblical information, or if you just have kind of general questions like, well, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Now, if you have some general questions, it might not be the best because there's not really like a way to reference what that sort of questions are. You know what I mean? If you had a question, concerning, how many days was Paul in prison or something like that, might not be the best place to look for that kind of information because it'd be pretty impossible to find. It doesn't appear to have any kind of rhyme or reason. But I guess there are some kind of section headings there, but they're very light. Here's just a section on God. Here's a question, a section on New Testament scriptures. But certainly for like quizzing or something like that, I think it'd be pretty interesting. Maybe like for one of those Bible trivia game shows or something like that, So there's quite a few. I mean, they say 1,000. I don't know if it's an actual 1,000, but it seems like it. Oh yeah, definitely seems like it. It's going on and on here. There it goes. Still more questions. So yeah, I would guess their 1,000 question claim is correct. And then after we get past those 1,000 questions, all right, I'll show you the last couple there. Oh, there you go. We get to some beautiful maps, and I use that term very loosely. Beautiful in the sense of, maybe only a mother could love. Kind of standard stuff that we see for this era. It's sort of kind of, discolored as far as the paper goes. Kind of atrociously colored, overly crowded, too detailed maps. They're not the worst ones I've seen. I have a couple Bibles that, like, you mentioned bad maps, and like my brain instantly goes to those couple Bibles. I have one that, like, I call them homebrew maps, and it's like the kind of thing that somebody might have sketched out with a Sharpie. And I have like 2 editions where, like, that seems to be the case, where somebody just sat down like with a ruler and Sharpie and kind of scribbled it out. So those are the ones that I always think of. But these aren't, they're not terrible, but man, they get crowded. I mean, I guess it's better than nothing because it will help you a little bit, but you're going to be kind of studying and looking at it for quite a while to figure it all out. After the maps, we just have one kind of the end sheet there. And there's a little H30 marked up on the top corner, and then the item number down there, which looks like S1991HC. So those would be the only kind of indicators, I guess. Let me go ahead and get you some measurements. And this guy comes in at just below 8 inches tall and about 5 1/8 wide. And as far as thickness goes, it is like 1 inch and 3/8, 1 inch and 3/8, I guess, wide or thick. Sorry. You can also see here there's like a little bit of kind of an issue here. I'm not too sure what that is. It kind of feels like maybe the leather separated. Oh, that was one thing I wanted to point out to you. So normally, we have like edge lined and paste down, and then we'll have like an Oxford hollow, which is like a little gap in the cover. So this is a different style. This is called case binding. And if you notice here, there's no gap between the book block and the book and the leather cover here. And that's because the book block is glued directly to the leather cover. So that is one way to kind of do this construction. And that might be why there's not so much flexibility there in the gutter. But the book block is just glued directly down to the cover leather there. And that's called case binding. So let's take a look at the text, and I'll get you a size. Start with the capitals. And it looks to be about an 8-point font for the capitals versus Times New Roman. I'll look for an M. Lowercase looks to be about an 8.5-point font. So I always go with a lowercase only because there's more lowercase letters than there are uppercase letters. So I would say that this is an 8-point font in comparison to Times New Roman. So not a terribly sized font, certainly not a large print, but if you're looking for kind of a, I guess like a mid-size reader, this might not be a bad option for you. If you're a fan of the KJV and you like vintage Bibles like I do, this certainly wouldn't be a bad choice, especially given the quality, and the construction and just the, kind of the overall features that it offers. Bible buddies, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave them down below. If you could like, comment, subscribe, all the happy YouTube stuff, I would be much appreciative. Until next time, Bible buddies, bye.